I wanted to give people models for how to do this, to understand that it's messy, it's hard, it's not like it's excuse me, easier than school, but it really works. So, school is great if you like it, if you can afford it, if somebody else is paying for it, if you can go for free, that's awesome. I want to make sure that people know they have alternatives and that we start to have more respect for people who have learned things without going to school. I'll give you the most important thing from the book in a nutshell, which is that people don't, when you're being an independent learner, you're not actually doing it by yourself for most people. You are learning with other people, from other people, in a lot of ways. And so one of the things that I really want to implore you to do is share what you know with other people and contribute to learning communities, whether they're informal or formal, whether it's just helping somebody out, mentoring someone, giving somebody advice. These are all things that help everybody learn without school. So to that end, I have gathered 7 totally awesome people to talk to you about learning things outside of school. And after everybody talks, you're welcome to come up and ask people questions and assault them with your needs, and you can do the same with me. In addition to that, we have this incredible opportunity here. Can one of you guys come up and explain what you're doing so that I don't botch it?
I'll botch it.
Okay, you can botch it yourself, and I don't feel guilty. This is David from Make It Happen.
So I'm here with Tracy and Sarah, and we're here to help you make it happen. So if you want to sign up, we have a sign-up sheet in the back, and after the other speakers will be here for a while, and we will work with you to decide what you want to make happen, and then we will make you commit to making it happen. So we're at your service.
So the first person who is here to tell you about what he knows is named Greg, and you may have heard of his awesome unauthorized tours of the Met. He's now expanding that to a company called Museum Hack, which is going to be going on in many museums, and you should take one of his tours, and he's going to help talk to you about being comfortable in museums and getting more in love with art.
Wasn't stupid. I wanted them to actually respect me. I didn't want them to think I was on their level. I never was, I'm still not. But I wanted them to think that I was at least working hard at it. So I would then start to figure out all the things I could isolate that might have gone wrong, so I could ask the question. And I discovered, to my surprise and pleasure, that increasingly I would be 2/3 of the way into this well-formatted question. Well, I tried X and it didn't work, and I tried Y and it didn't work, and I tried Z and okay, it's Z. And I would end up answering the question for myself. I hadn't just internalized the jargon, I hadn't just internalized the mindset. I'd started to learn, and I could feel it. And that felt like the end of the line for a long time. Oh, I've gotten to the point where I can answer my own questions. And then the third phase started, where people would come in and they would ask questions that I recognized as newbie questions. And I thought, if I could recognize that as a newbie question, maybe I'm not a newbie anymore. And I would jump on those questions like they were a live grenade, and I was saving my friends from this. And once I started answering questions, I thought of myself as protecting the people who educated me. If I could pick up the simple questions, they could concentrate on the complicated ones. And it was, that's the end for it. It's not when you've learned as much as you want to learn. It's when you can turn around and start teaching them. Because if that doesn't happen, then all it is, all community is a wasting resource that people are going to draw down. You'll end up exhausting the community because you treat them as something to extract from without returning. And this isn't advice about how to learn a particular thing. It certainly works for Unix and Perl, as I can attest. But I think the real The real thing about community that people often don't understand is that whether or not the community you want to learn from knows more than you is the least important characteristic about that community. If you want to learn from a community, don't pick the community you want to learn from. Pick the community you want to join. Because only deciding you respect those people enough that you want to join them will you take care to format your own answers, to internalize your own learning, and to turn around and start answering questions for others. And you've gotten where you need to go, not when you've learned everything you want to learn, but when you can turn around and start teaching. Right? The best thing I think, of the many things that Kio said on the subject, the best thing I think she said is the only problem with the word autodidact is the word auto part. And is the auto part. And I think that observation is the best thing to come out of this work. One of the big obstacles to people trying to learn things on their own is the sense that there's no orderly way to do this. Either you go to school or it's completely random. And what we've got in the book now is an observation about patterns that have been repeated over and over and over again. And one of the most important patterns, and one that I've had cause to think about because of the book, is the idea that it's when you join the community that you respect that you're really dragging yourself into a situation where you can learn. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching.
So, following on that, Jackie Mayer, who's an actual coding ninja in the interactive department of the New York Times, I've seen her wear a black hood, is going to talk to you about getting started learning to code. Yes?
What's the hashtag for this event?
Shit.
Because people want to Twitter about it.
It's not shit, no. Okay, somebody make one up.
Don't go back to school?
Okay, don't go back to school with no apostrophe, bad grammar, go for it. Okay, Jackie.
Okay. How do I get this there? It doesn't have to be right away. Hello. Can you guys all hear me? I'm not shouting into your eardrums. Good? Okay, cool. Hi, so I'm Jackie. I work at the New York Times on the interactive news desk. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's it's a little skunkworks experiment by my boss Aaron Pulhofer to combine his crazy idea that we could combine journalism with programming. And that was a few years before I joined, which was 4 years ago. I'm not here to talk to you about that, though. I'm here to talk to you about how I learned how to code and how you can learn how to code, too, without going to school. Because Kio asked earlier how many of you dropped out. I didn't turn around to see how many of you dropped out, and I don't know how many of you dropped out twice, but I did. I love school, actually, but it didn't always work for me in my life, and I kind of am a bit of a drifter and a nomad and whatever. You know, school wants to be in one place, usually. Anyway, so I learned how to code through rather untraditional ways. You guys have heard of hackers? There's this guy, Madhu Kaza, who had this radio show with WBAI. When I was in high school, I grew up here in New York City, and I was on like some BBS. I didn't really know what a BBS was, but I was on it. And I heard this radio show called Off the Hook, and this guy was talking about cool stuff, they had these meetings. It was like this group called 2600. What does that mean? I don't even know why that number? I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was into punk rock. And so I had cool colored hair, and I showed up, and it kind of looked like I made it in, but I had no idea what anyone was talking about. That was okay though. So I listened to WBAI, Off the Hook. I got into the Hacker Quarterly 2600 magazine, became friends with a bunch of hackers. I got my first job at a .com when I was still in high school in 1995. Dating myself here, but and I got that job because I just went online as much as you could back in 1994, 1995, Sorry, Clay, but I was Team Mindbox.
I know,
And I am living proof that you can choose the other people and still manage to eke out a living. Anyway, but yeah, so yeah, I went online and I was like, what do I need to do to get on this World Wide Web thing? Whatever that is. And I found the NCSA guide to Mosaic, how to do HTML. I was like, what's HTML? I don't know. So I went and I learned it, and I went to this, I just got into NYU, and they had a job there, and I went to the job there, and there were these two blokes at a table for their new company, Interactive Imaginations. And they did this website called Riddler.com. You guys all look far too young to remember Riddler.com, but it was one of these online gaming websites, crossword puzzles, that kind of game. And they hired me, and that was how I started. And I just I learned this thing called Photoshop. But yeah, so anyway, that is my background. That is how I actually got started. And I could talk forever about what Clay was just talking about, which is the autodidact, how the auto part is wrong, right? And I never actually used such a fancy word for it, which is, I love the word autodidact. But I always would tell people ask me, how did you learn to do the stuff that you do? And I would say, with help from a few thousand or million friends, people on the internet, actual friends. I got started in the hacker community. I may or may not have done some things that I won't talk about here, but I didn't stay in there. But those friends accepted me for who I was, and it was all about openness, and transparency, sometimes forcefully. But anyway, today, you have so many options, and so this is my beautiful, beautiful gift. If you want to learn how to code, there are so many cool ways to do that. Can I just?
What do you? Yeah.
I want to click on the link.
I think
I'm gonna click on the link.
Probably you're not going to do that.
I think you can take
Just pull the mic out of the neck.
She's gonna.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I know how to code. I don't really know how to do this stuff. This is real world. Thank you. Okay, so I want to start with one of my favorite things in the world. So the interactive news team that I was going to talk about that much, we do a lot of our stuff in Ruby on Rails. Not all of it, but a lot. And I like Ruby on Rails. And if you want to learn Ruby on Rails and you haven't like zombies, boom, there's a website for you. Learn Rails the zombie way. It's just one of many of these amazing websites that people have put together that let you, come on, click, try things interactively, let's try. And yeah, it's interactive, right in your web browser. Even has a cute little cartoon at the bottom and stuff. There's a website called, there's a language called Go that I've been trying to learn recently. And Go has a very cute little mascot. And same exact deal. It has interactive things. You don't even have to download anything. You don't have to have a compiler or, it doesn't matter. You don't even have to have a terminal program. You can just go online. Let's see. There's also, actually before I go any further, how many of you guys are coders? Cool. How many of you guys want to be coders? Maybe. Okay, cool. All right. Good to know. Anyone ever hear of something called Redis? It's this cool, data store. It's kind of hard to, it's hard for me to categorize because it does a lot of cool things. But the first time I ever remembered seeing something interactive on a website that I was trying, for something I was trying to learn, was on this site, Redis. So Redis is this data, it's kind of like a cache, but also a database. Anyway, I could go on forever about that, but I was trying to get my head around it. And I noticed this bit on the documentation. I was like, what is that? Well, it actually just lets you interact with Redis. So give me a name a proper noun or whatever, a noun.
I'm gonna say,
Weather.
Tiger.
So right there, I just like set something, I set up a key in this Redis that exists somewhere, I don't know, called NSA. I don't know if you guys can read that, it's kind of small. And then I set it to Snowden, I don't know why, and I was able to get it right back. That's like immediate feedback, and I find that so important because when I was trying to learn how to code, I mentioned I learned the NCSA guide and Mosaic HTML. And then my second book was the K&R book on C programming, which was great, and I had absolutely no idea what any of it meant. I have since gone back and reread it because of Redis. Redis is a brilliant piece of software that's written in brilliant C. The guy lives in Sicily, and I talked to him, we've become friends. I learned C through the K&R book and through viewing the source code of Redis, which is also open source. After that, God, how many languages have I gone through? Gone through a bunch. I went into Java, because Java was like the hotness. It was like everyone was doing Java, and Java was cool, and then Java got enterprise Java beans, and people started wearing suits, and I'm like, no. So I got into something like PHP, and that got a little bit like messy, so I stopped doing PHP, but throughout it all, I loved Perl. I was a Unix systems administrator for a while. No neckbeard, but that's okay. You don't have to have a neckbeard. Although that would be cool. Let me see. And then I got into Ruby. How many of you guys do Ruby? On Rails or off? Cool. I really loved Ruby. I never got into Python, but I have a deep respect for Python. It's also a very elegant language, and there's something to be said for languages that are that you can look at as a human being, maybe not even knowing anything about computers, and read the code, and it makes sense. It seems like it's self-documenting in a way. It should always document your code, though. Ruby and Python are that for me. But yeah, so I got into Ruby. I'm getting into stuff now like Go and Clojure. Clojure is like what the really cool like Hacksaw kids are doing these days, as far as I know. So I'm gonna like dress in black, read Canoe, do some Clojure when I leave here. But anyway, I hope this all made sense. Maybe. You don't have to go to school to learn how to code. I did drop out of 2 colleges. One of them was NYU. I did not study computer science ever. I studied philosophy and I studied epidemiology. But coding is different.
Jackie, what's the URL to the gist that you were showing?
There is a shoutkey. Shoutkey.com is actually very useful for situations like this. It's like a pretty URL generator. Shoutkey.com / they automatically generate a word. Shoutkey.com / regime. It was random. If you just go to that, it'll redirect you to my guest with all those things. But it's a public gist, and my GitHub name is Jackie, JACQI. So it's easy because it's my first name, but it's hard because it's my first name and it's French. So anyway, but yeah, there are links to all sorts of things. My friend Zed Shaw has been, I can get to all of these sheets. My friend Zed Shaw has done this amazing work on learning code the hard way. Don't be put off by that, it's learning really the easy way. But he has it for Python, for Ruby, for C, for SQL, for everyone's favorite thing, regular expressions. Who loves regular expressions? Yeah! All right, there are so many resources out there, and feel free to come talk to me, because I get nervous, and I'm up here, you did way better. Dude. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jackie. So all you people who didn't raise your hand to say that you're trying to learn to code, you should go here and just like play with it, because I did that a while ago because I was sitting in an office where there were people coding and they were talking about it, and I was like, I'm listening to people speak Greek, except it's English. So I started to learn Python just so that I would understand what the hell they were talking about, and that's a good thing to do. So take a look at this. Also, Jackie has me now editing in this format. Yeah, which is just weird, but you know, I'm doing it. So
You're at first.
next is wonderful CGI artist Peter Richardson, who is going to talk to you about something very important, which is how to learn things really fast under adverse conditions, which is to say, learning in the shit.
That was my secret working title. Thank you. So yes, CG artist.
CG artist, that breaks down into things like 3D animation, graphics programming, general anything that you can make pictures with a computer. That's my specialty. Well, it's kind of my specialty. In fact, when Kio asked if I had anything to talk about, I had just come off of a job which is fairly typical for me, which involves learning something extremely quickly that I had no idea about beforehand. I wind up kind of hot dropping into projects near their ends while they're on fire and trying to figure out if there's some way that it can be salvaged and hopefully being productive in the middle of that. To give you some examples, one of my first effects jobs, normally these are things, I'm a freelancer I should say first, so these are for like advertising agencies around town. One of my first jobs in effects was for the third Matrix movie, Revolutions. Do you remember this jewel of human cultural achievement? When I see footage or stills from that movie, they look like panic to me. They look like 100-hour weeks. People working in front of the computers at 5 in the morning, drinking martinis to stay awake. It was a bad scene. We called it the shit. It was a shit show. And I should say at the outset, I'm talking about not actual shit. This is not a war. These are not wartime scenarios, but it's a metaphor, and it's probably the closest I will come to learning under adverse conditions. So that's the term that we sort of settled on. So yes, so that's on one end of the spectrum, but this isn't just about work stuff. This is for any situation in your life in which you are working beyond your capacity. So you may be a champion type A multitasker, but you will hit a wall at some point in your life doing whatever it is you're trying to do, and you will be outside of your comfort zone. I seem to wind up working a lot outside of my comfort zone. That could just be the industry that I work in, and it might have something to do with my own personality. But it's not just work. So that was many years ago. A more recent example would be just under a year ago. I walked into a church in Bay Ridge to volunteer for Occupy Sandy. They looked at me and said, well, we don't have any massively heavy objects for you to lift, which is clearly your area of specialty. However, do you happen to know Google Docs? I said, yes. How about Google Voice? Yes. You have a phone? Yes. I said, okay, congratulations. You are now dispatched. Everything that everyone brings to the church needs to go somewhere. All the volunteers coming to the church need to go somewhere. We don't have a system for that yet. You're it. Go. That was also a very intense time, but also massively rewarding because I wasn't making a Matrix sequel. I was doing something that had demonstrable human value. So these are kind of the two ends of experience that I'm going to describe here. And you may notice, if you pay attention, that this really isn't a set of practices that work only under adverse conditions, but like I said before, even if you're really practicing this kind of thing, you tend to forget. Your brain loses a lot of its capacity under certain kinds of stress. So this is a kind of heuristic, or not heuristic, but a protocol that I've developed more or less organically over the last however many years. And I'll get straight into it. The first thing is food and water. You need those. Which leads straight to my second point, which is notes. Take notes. When I discover that I'm in the shit, the first thing I do is write down food and water on a sticky and put it somewhere really visible. so that I will remember. The second thing I read underneath it is take notes. So food, water, and take notes. Those are crucial. This also leads to the third thing, which is priorities. Have some. Know what they are. Ideally, make a hierarchy of needs for your situation. The first two are food and water. Take notes. You're catching on. The third thing is priorities. So after those first two, the next thing has to be figuring out what the priorities are. So this is where triage comes in. And of course, this isn't a medical scenario. Mostly, I haven't had to test it in that situation yet. But you split everything up. It's going to be thrown at you into needs to be dealt with immediately, next, and lower priority, which under stress mostly means you're going to forget about it immediately as soon as you make that call. After triage. Right, and whatever you happen to be doing past that point, you need to be able to connect back through to this priority chain. If you lose that connection, then you will be overwhelmed by circumstance and your effectiveness will be greatly diminished. The next thing is time management, and this is really, I think, for me, where most of the effort comes, because I'm classically really bad at it. When you are in a crisis mode, the first thing that goes really is, well, for me, it's the ability to see past about 5 feet and 30 seconds into the future. This event horizon drops in front of your head. So in that case, you have to offload. A lot of these tricks are just about offloading things that your brain can do normally onto external help, external sources of help. I'm meant to be offloading what 10 minutes is like onto some device, but I fail to do that. If I get too far, please help. One technique you may all be familiar with is the Pomodoro technique, which involves taking some timepiece, some timer, set that for X number of minutes. Every so often it rings and reminds you, you're live, you have a problem. How's it going? Are you working on it? Is what you're doing successful? Take a break, food and water, take notes, priorities, and so on.
The timer's usually the quickest take notes.
Yes, the original Pomodoro technique apparently is a tomato-shaped timer.
I don't know.
He was Italian. Pretty sure. Yes. So related to that, multitasking, really bad. Try not to do it. Even if you can spin a dozen plates at once outside of these scenarios, I have learned through repeated and painful experience that my limit is I really can't keep more than 3 things in my head at once. One of which always has to be, I can't keep more than 3 things in my head at once. So that's one, which leaves me 2, really, functionally. And if I have to switch, if I'm forced to switch for some reason, I have to write it down. I have to leave a trail, a tether back to whatever it was that I was doing in the first place. Writing it on your hand is helpful. Yes, but at the same time, although these are often techniques for dealing with a lot of things being thrown at you at once, you will also need to get lost in details occasionally, especially if you're working on a problem that involves determining whether something is possible or not. You will need to give yourself the time, in this case, to set the timer for a longer chunk. Maybe for me, 3 hours is a good one, especially if I'm doing some sort of technical thing. And then dive in and forget about the chaos outside until the timer is up, and then think about life again. Apart from that, the last section is seek help. You will almost never be alone in these situations, and this goes back to what's been said earlier. We're learning from each other constantly, and even if it is a solo project that you're working on, the internet, it exists, it's amazing. If there are people in close proximity, recognize friends, learn how to do that. Look for people with their heads up who are willing to engage in a crisis with you. Try to be one of those people. In that way, you can make a team, which is much more effective. Load balancing is key in these situations as well. So, those are the main, I guess, 5 categories. Within each of those, there are advanced techniques. One that I'm trying to work on is nutrition. Like, how does food work? Turns out I'm not the only one who doesn't really understand what happens when you eat stuff. Blood sugar is key. I'm just talking about things like the difference between simple and complex carbohydrates, how they relate to your blood sugar, protein, and how it can help. It's the title of my next talk. Beyond that, there are other more complicated kinds of body chemistry hacks, including, I mean, we all jump into, well, this is water, which is good. Caffeine and alcohol, we abuse those probably while trying to solve panicky situations more than we should, but it's really, it's an advanced maneuver, and I'm still not that great at it. Beyond that, I mean, there are so many other things. There's Red Bull, of course, is the drug of choice in my industry. There's the one that they give to fighter pilots on long-distance missions. It reduces your feeling of needing to sleep. Talk to me after class, fellas. Yeah. So some caveats. All of these things will need to be tuned for your personality, of course. Not everything will work for everyone. You'll need to figure out your own protocol if you wind up in these situations. Also, as I think I mentioned earlier, these aren't, strictly speaking, these won't just work in panic situations. Some versions of these things I find, like food and water, tend to be fairly constant no matter what I'm doing. Still working on that one. They're also only for short bursts. This is not a way to live with panic long term. That's something that I am not very good at and I don't recommend. And actually, seriously, I have to keep remembering that no matter how panicky I feel about whatever it is that I'm working on, there are people living around the world in much greater states of stress and suffering than I will likely ever experience. Keeping that amount of perspective, that specific piece of perspective, I think helps me detach from what would otherwise be a crisis that's happening to me and turns it ideally into something that I am doing to help, ideally again, reduce the total amount of stress in the world, which is leading me away from advertising, actually. So that helps me function and ideally is an improvement in general. So that's it, thank you.
So the drug is called Provigil, and I just want to say actually that when I'm writing fiction, a lot of the things that Peter talked about are the ways that I stay on track and get through things, and I don't think of it as a crisis on a daily basis, but food, water, taking notes, the little egg timer, all of these things are actually really good. So. The next person you're going to learn from is Keira Alexandra, who has a company called Employee Number One, of which I believe she's the only employee. And she is going to talk to you about learning graphic design, which is, I think, one of the most common things that people tell me they want to go back to school for. And no disrespect to those of you in the room who teach graphic design, you can totally do it without that. So, and actually, Ian, can you raise your hand? Self-taught graphic designer who designed the cover of the book, which is beautiful. So, round of applause. Who is now watching?
The first thing I always tell myself when doing these things is test the A/B.
Do you need a minute?
Well, you don't have the newest version of Keynote on the spreadsheet.
Do you have a computer with me?
Yes. Oh, let's plug it in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This might be a good moment if anyone needs to run and get another beer. We need like probably 45 seconds up here. I'm not. What?
Or buy a book.
Or buy a book, but you want to do that when I can sign them. So I'm not like funny enough to do stand-up comedy up here, but I can probably, if anyone wants to know more pharmaceutical names, I used to work on pharmaceutical advertising, so I can list side effects, and if you have any conditions that I can name drugs, although I don't know the generic name.
What are the side effects of the one you told us about?
Provigil?
Yeah.
Early death. Anything else? Progress?
Hey.
All set?
Guys, we find the ambulance in the mouse.
What?
You always have to find the mouse.
because it can cause bleeding. You want to take Tylenol or just
Do you want to take some counteractive
early death? Okay, let's try that again. Keira, Alexandra.
I'm not gonna bother fixing the mirror. It's not that important. All right, so I have to tailor my talk a little bit since 4 people have already told me what to do, really eloquently and nicely. Some of my feelings about it overlap. So I should say I do go to design school and I do teach design in a school, but I don't necessarily think you have to go to design school. Is that too annoying? Just don't look at the next slide, just look over there. It's just for your entertainment anyway, it's not really important. So yes, what did I learn in school? I learned how to use a Staromat. I learned how to use a Lucia. I set type in metal. I drew with Paca. None of these things do I do anymore. What I did learn at my first job is, which was really important, and it's sort of what shaped me more than any of my education did, is do what you don't know. So the other weird thing about design is it's not really like a skill so much as what everyone else is talking about. It's quite skill-based. It's just stuff that informs the world in fun and interesting ways, sometimes terrifying ways, sometimes ugly ways. So the things people always talk about is what is good design, and I have to put that in quotes because we don't necessarily know, nor can you necessarily teach it, nor is it necessarily always important, but that's the question people love to ask. In school, you might learn who are the masters of design. Now you have other ways to do that. What's the history of design? You might also learn that from all the people, Clay mentioned, when you get out and get there in the world and ask all the right questions. Old people like telling young people about old people, so ask them. At design school, you might learn who your future colleagues what competition are or not. And I think the most important thing is the definition of design is continually changing, and the relationship of design is always in flux. So I think it's more important that you go find that definition for yourself rather than from an institution. An institution will help inform that or help you question it, but you can just as easily find your own definition. So, as we all know, the sort of dirty words of design are style, trends, and aesthetics, whereas the words we more prefer are problem solving, improvement, quality of life, increased functionality, greater joy and beauty, invention, newness, authorship, partnership, curation, and creation. So, how can you find those things? You can. My best advice is to work with people who don't do what you do. So if you want to think of design and what design can do for you now, team up with a scientist or a hacker or a coder or go on the net tour or any of those things. But working with another designer might be slightly redundant. If you're working with someone else and you're working on solutions, you might find better ways. I myself learned print design in school. I mostly make films now. A friend of mine who was a theater major and then was one of my students in design school makes, I don't know what you call them, sculptures that are typographic videos. Another friend in common of ours did TV graphics, then had a gaming company, and now teaches at MIT. It's just, you're going to find different things by experiencing different people, more than you are going to design school. And a frequent collaborator of mine currently I was talking to him about this, of course, today, instead of doing our work. He didn't go to school, he was dropped out, he got a big corporate job, they sponsor, continuing education programs. He is a master of design, far more than I am before having gone to college for it. And it's becoming increasingly popular to sort of question design and redefine it. There was the co-curated I Would Way show. The theme was design is not design. So there you go. It's forever going to be questioned and challenged. So my advice, this is my advice, Colin. Work with people you like doing things other than what you do. Cross-pollinate as much as possible. Make new things by creating new definitions. This is true collaboration. Hold yourself accountable and responsible to someone other than your clients. This is often your collaborator. Make sure that person challenges you. No yes men. Constantly make and constantly question. Design because you want to, and create your own definitions. School will merely guide you to this goal, not tell it to you. And lastly, just a quote, there's a fine line between design and common sense. And just about any activity which involves originality and forethought can, in theory, be described as design. So you get to do that stuff. So by the way, it's from a book called Hello World. It's really nice. This is Kio's book. Thank you, Kio, for bringing me out. I feel very, not qualified, but feel free to talk to me. Bye.
Thank you, Keira. I don't think anyone's qualified really for anything, so you're good. One of the things that Keira talked about that I heard a lot in interviewing for the book was it turns out having independent learning skills is like a job qualification at this point. So that's a thing that people who didn't go to school have learned how to especially communicate when they are looking for a job. The next and last two presentations are, one is very hands-on, and the other is going to make you hungry. So I hope you've had some weird Czechoslovak cookies up front there. Would you like to come up? We need to pass out some paper and pens because you're all about to become creative writers. You can do it out of your comfort zone.
So I'm gonna.
This is Madhu Kaza, and she is a wonderful writer and performance artist who has done art pieces that I really wish I had been able to go to, but I was home with my infant. So there we go. Do you need me to do anything?
I will get this.
Okay.
So I'm going to use about 10 minutes, and we're going to do some experiential learning. So I'm going to pass. If you have your own notebook and want to write in your own notebook, if you have your own user, that's great. If you don't, I'm passing around a notebook. You can just tear off a sheet. In the pocket in the notebook, for those of you who have different handwriting styles and want to write on index cards, there are index cards. We're going to do 2 writing assignments. So 1 sheet of paper should be fine, or maybe 2 index cards. So this will be going around this way. And then the other way, there's a little envelope going around with little slips of paper. So take 1 slip of paper and hold on to it.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 foot there. I wasn't listening. Thank you.
And just as the materials are going around, also by the way, if anyone does need nutritional counseling, I'm definitely able to help you with that afterwards. I have no qualifications, but I can definitely do it. And happy to do it. So basically, I'm going to talk about learning to write and learning creative writing in particular. So again, my name is Madhu Kaza, and I am a prose writer. I am currently working on a novel, which is my first novel. A while ago, I did drop out of a graduate program in literature. However, recently I graduated from another program, my MFA program, so I have the technical qualifications, but I graduated in May. But I've spent the last almost year trying to deprogram myself from what I've learned in my MFA program. And there's a few people I know here, and those of you who know me know that I've been very cranky in my program. And I was just thinking about, I think MFA programs can be useful, again, if you have funding, and for me, I had funding, it gave me time and structure to write. But I think most of what I learned about writing, or how I learned to write, really came from outside of that program and came from different communities, different spaces, and that's what I want to talk to you about. So if anyone wants to talk afterwards about how to structure an MFA style workshop, that's really easy. It's, basically MFA programs are half you sit around talking about literature and half you do a workshop. It's pretty easy, but I've been thinking about these other ways in which I've learned writing, and one of the really great things I did this year was I skipped out on my graduation and went to a conference of women writers of African descent in Ghana. And I felt like I was skipping school to go to this conference, and it was amazing because what I encountered reminded me of the way that I really, what's vital to me about writing and about the way that I learned to write. And I encountered all these women writers, some of whom are published by major publishers, some of whom are bloggers, some of whom have self-published and have built up readerships by publishing numerous books over many years. And they come from all different backgrounds, but people who are living, making their way in their lives, making livings, doing their work, getting their work out. And so, for example, there was one woman who was really inspiring. She was a Zimbabwean writer who was trained as an accountant, and she'd been a revolutionary and had to go into hiding, and no one really would help her out. She said ultimately the people who helped her go into hiding and took care of her for a couple of years were sex workers. And so she talked about living with these sex workers in their community, learning about things that happened in their world. And she ended up writing a series of stories about that experience. And eventually published more work. But it came out of very I'm going to sit and write my masterpiece, work of fiction kind of. It came from just experience, from necessity, urgency. She still works as an accountant. Her name is Richard. I met people like this, and it reminded me of how I came to write. And it reminded me of different ways that there's this huge world, and there are many ways to kind of enter into writing. Including actually, one of the things I just want to mention, there's so many different ways in which I kind of came to writing, but one thing that was really instrumental for me was many years ago. I started with two friends. We started a nonprofit organization. It was all about teaching creative writing and literature in non-academic spaces. So we've done literary events in parks, in hospitals, in jails, in laundromats, the DMV, things like that. And the idea, again, was just, why not everywhere? Why not for anyone? And I think I've learned a lot, actually, about my own values as a writer through that work. I want to mention, I'm going to talk about 4 things that I think are really helpful things to do if you want to write. And they are to write, to play, to reflect, and to connect. And I'll talk about these. But we're going to start with writing. So what we're going to do is something some of you probably know this. It's just free writing. This is our first exercise. So just for about 90 seconds, it's going to be very brief. What I want you to do is also called automatic writing. In your notebook or a piece of paper that you have, the idea is I'm going to time it, and when I say start, you're just going to start writing, and you're not going to stop moving your hand and writing until I say stop. And the idea is just to keep your hand moving, and even if you don't know what to write, just write, I don't know what to write, But gets done. So what was the point of that? Really just, I mean, often you would do that for a little bit longer, maybe for 5 minutes. Probably what you wrote wasn't that interesting. Maybe it was really interesting. But the point of that is that to be a writer, you need to write, right? Right. And it's the biggest impediment for, people have to being writers is that they don't write, right? So here you go, you started to write. Now it's really great. This kind of writing, just there's no stakes, very low stakes. It's like it can be the happiest thing. No one's ever going to look at it. It doesn't have to make sense, And the idea is that it just gets you kind of in the flow of writing, and it's part of developing a writing habit, and that's really critical, right? If you're going to be a writer. So this is the kind of exercise if you do it every day for 5 minutes. It kind of creates this thing that you want to do it. Like it just becomes a habit. Like you brush your teeth for 5 minutes a day. You just do this writing. Doesn't matter. It's like a toothpaste goes down the drain. The writing kind of just goes away. But so it's not it's really good just to get into the practice of writing. Now, if you can do this free writing every day and not become a very good writer. Because this is just about kind of entering into the stream, right? So what do you want to do? You want to become more attuned, if you want to be more skilled as a writer. You want to do something a little bit more focused, right? So I guess one suggestion I'd have for that is to keep a writer's notebook. And for that, so I would distinguish between a writer's notebook and a diary or a, just free writing, and that it's a little bit more purposeful, right? Whereas there's no stakes and the free writing or keeping a diary, a writer's notebook is where you kind of note down observations. So for instance, things that you might use, put down in a writer's notebook or over, especially in New York City. I mean, you know that you'll come home, you tell your roommate or your partner or your friends about some crazy person you saw on the subway, something really incidental. And the idea is instead of immediately telling your roommate or your partner about this, just write it down, to write as much detail as you can. So things that you might put into your writer's notebook are overheard dialogue, fragments of speech, little lines or quotations for meetings, thoughts or ideas that you have for writing, words that you come across in your meeting or just that you overhear that you really like. You might look up some words and look at their etymologies, interesting sentences, and also incorrect grammar, mistakes that you hear, mixed metaphors, those kinds of accidents are really good. Accidents of language are really good to put down. So this will help you kind of just, be collecting material, but also developing that skill of paying attention, so for dialogue, for description, and so on. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is play. So this is definitely not something you'd ever be learning in school, but play. So the idea is to have fun, heighten your susceptibility to language. So, think about it this way. Writing any art, right, requires both abandon, a kind of recklessness, a wildness, a looseness, and a kind of control or discipline, right? You might write freely and then have to edit, right? And especially for those of you who worry about being too controlled and needing to loosen up, play I think is really important, even when you have a dedicated writing project. So even if you're working on something you're working on your novel, I think there are opportunities to experiment that can help you with your writing. So now we're just going to do, and this is also where you can do writing exercises, prompt and things like that. So now we're going to do the second exercise, which is just to take that slip of paper I gave you, and there's a sentence there, and use that as a prompt, and just write, use that as a first sentence, and then just write whatever you want. It can be in the form of a poem, a story, just, but use that sentence as a starting point for a bit of writing. We'll just do this for a minute.
Mother, the envelope can get to the side if you can just give a sentence to the one.
Oh, okay. So
I'll just read this one. Yeah. If people do the same one.
yeah, that's right.
It happened earlier, later.
It happened earlier, later. closed. We did that really quickly. Normally I would give you a little bit more time, but I just want to know, does anyone want to stand up and say out loud, read what they wrote?
I wrote, it happened earlier, later. When it comes right down to it, time is actually a very confusing thing. What is earlier? What is later? Physics tells us that all of time happens simultaneously now, so yes, it happened earlier. One looks for later, but it's also true that later exists and earlier exists in the same moment, which is now. But I digress. What happened was that she killed him. Why she chose to do that, I do not know, but I know it happened earlier. That's how far I know.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Maybe one more person.
It had to happen. I'll just read this one. It happened earlier, later. These are the kinds of, sorry, my handwriting's screwing me up. These are the kinds of phrases, oh man. I know what it's about. I could reconstruct this. I was trying so hard to write fast. These are the kinds of phrases they would saddle him with in school. Nonsense puzzles of diction and grammar. Uncomplicated to the point of being boring. Pushing on these non-specific generalities of linguistic vapor was taxing, but with sufficient momentum, they were achievable, defeatable, with the worst result being wasted time and a cramped hand.
Thank you.
I'll read one more.
Okay, one more.
I'm going to read my friend Alex.
With his permission?
Yes, he told me to. It happened earlier or later. These things are not déjà vu. They feel like déjà vu, which I suppose was always a feeling first and a looping of life second. But these fake déjà vus, which give you the same pause in a conversation or on the train, are also obviously false, confessing their imposter code, like their breakfast.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I just want, and now we all have a shared experience, so afterwards you can also go up to someone and say, it happened earlier, later, and carry on. Those lines that I gave you were from a poem. You probably can't read this, because I hardly can, but by the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska. And basically, it would be really fun to read the Polish out loud for just listening, even though I don't speak Polish, maybe someone here does. But we don't have time for that. So I'm actually just going to read this poem out loud so you can hear it. It could have happened. It had to happen. It happened earlier, later, nearer, farther off. It happened, but not to you. You were saved because you were the first. You were saved because you were the last. Alone, with others, on the right, the left, because it was raining, because of the shade, because the day was sunny. You were in luck, there was a forest. You were in luck, there were no trees. You were in luck, a rake, a hook, a beam, a break, a jam, a turn, a quarter inch, an instant. You were in luck, just then a straw went floating by. As a result, because, although, despite, what would have happened if a hand, a foot, within an inch, a hair's breadth from an unfortunate coincidence? See, so you're here, still dizzy from another dodge, close shave, reprieve, one hole in the net and you slipped through. I couldn't be more shocked or speechless. Listen how your heart pounds inside me. Okay, so I just chose that poem because it has those nice opening lines that are good prompts, but you can take any line from a poem. I like taking lines from poems because they're kind of, or a sentence from another story, and just use it as a prompt. So that's an example of a kind of exercise where you just use found language to create your own writing, right? Those kinds of exercises. But other forms of play, for instance, just a couple examples that I'll give you. So, I mean, again, it might not lead to, you might not be related to the specific thing that you're working on, but it kind of opens up your kind of imagination and way of like, and loosens you up in terms of language. So I'm going to just show you two other examples of kind of play. One is, so I have a problem with mornings. I'm not a morning person. And so I asked a friend who's really good, really a morning person, to send me some instructions for the morning. So she sent me this postcard with some instructions. She said, "Dear Madhu, use, discard, innovate, pass it on." So she says, 1, make a bird call that would bring your desired people near. Wash your face with cold water. Write down the weirdest thing that happened to you yesterday. Be grateful. Stare out the window. What is new? What is growing? So this is an opportunity to begin writing, right? But asking for instructions and getting instructions. So this is a way of you can always give other people prompts and get prompts. And another kind of, again, just a kind of playful exercise is writing in groups and just doing, getting a large sheet of paper, giving different people instructions as you go, writing together on a page. Again, it doesn't necessarily lead to like your, masterwork, but it's a way to kind of, get you, going with writing. The last 2 things I want to mention are to reflect and to connect. And to reflect just means to be more analytical, to scrutinize, to think about what it is. That's when you might want to think about reading very carefully other works of other writers, analyzing the style of other writers. That's kind of the reading part, but also reading your own work very analytically. And also defining your own criteria, which I think is really important. There's a criteria that's developed in schools, and for you to kind of develop your own criteria. Just a really quick example of that, I went to an art school with Thomas Hirschhorn in the Bronx this summer, and his motto for his art school is quality no, energy yes. So energy is his criteria. Like that, just to develop your own idea of what it is that you're trying to do. And lastly, the idea of connect, which is to get feedback and to write. Part of all of these examples I've been giving in terms of play, in terms of these writing exercises, is that writing with others. So writing, I think everyone else has been saying, working with others, writing in community, getting feedback, and finding a forum, to get your work out. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I was sitting back, and I love that you all did it. Are any of you professional writers? Okay. That is amazing. I think 2 people raised their hands. So the last person who's going to talk to you is Kristen Taylor, who is a senior digital producer at AlJazeera, which has nothing to do with what she's going to talk to you about. When I ask people what they're trying to learn, many people tell me they're trying to learn to cook. Speaking of Peter's food and water. So Kristen's going to tell you how to learn, learn to cook. And then we're going to wrap up, and if you sign up to do Make It Happen, you should rush back, and that will sort of happen while we're stacking chairs, but you should totally do it. Okay, Kristen.
We're actually going to swap computers with
More jokes.
Did you hear the one about the 2 peanuts? One was assaulted. It's the only joke I know. Anyone else have a joke? Okay. So randomly, what are you trying to learn right now?
See, I'm learning Ruby on Rails. I just learned how to be a developer.
Can you repeat that?
I'm learning how to be a developer, Ruby on Rails. So I'm building websites. I used to be a policy analyst.
Nice. Do you like building websites?
Yeah, way more gratifying because the things that you build can directly affect how people interact with the world, as opposed to analysis, which is something people may read but never act on.
So I'm going to just say some of the wrap-up stuff here, which is thank you so much to Nikki and Carlos and Studio X. We're not done yet, but I'm just going to say it now. Please pick up your trash on your way out and throw it in the appropriate receptacle. You can get in touch with me through my website. It's just kiostark.com. I am happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about learning. My Twitter handle is my whole name. And Brie, am I supposed to say anything else? So,
Okay, what's your whole name?
Kio Stark, Kiostark. You ready? Ooh, okay. Here's Kristen.
Thank you for staying on this night of big thunderstorms. I think it's really tall. All right, let's hope this works. It's cool that we've had a lot of real talk tonight. That's where this begins. Oh, do we not push? Okay, so why don't I walk with this? Okay. All right, so this is a photo from when there were still dates on photos. This is July of the year 2000. That's me. I was wearing a dress. And this was this thing that happened where my grandmother and his grandmother went, oh shit, she doesn't know how to cook. And this was a problem. And I was quite young, and I sort of thought it was funny until we kind of got into a war about it. And I said, okay, while you two sort that out, why don't you both send me checks, and then we'll research some cooking schools so that I can get adequate education in this. And in the meantime, I'm just going to buy some books. Turned out, the Culinary Institute was starting to publish their manual, so I bought that and some other books. Pocketed the rest of the money, I went on a shopping spree, ended up cooking dinner for both of them, and was able to sort of cook their favorite foods as well as they could by the time I actually walked down the aisle in that dress. So you need to pick a parameter when you're starting to think about cooking. It needs to be somebody that you want to cook for, or some occasion that you want to cook to. I find it to be very, very helpful. You want to have a who, what, when, how long, and have a goal. You can calendar that. When I was starting to cook, I was making fancy things because I was trying to impress the grandmothers. So I was making things like beef Wellington, right? Which sounds really kind of scary, and it is scary because you have to learn how to make the mushroom thing, paste really, that goes around the tenderloin, and then you have to make the puff pastry, because why would you not like make the pastry too? And then there's a whole sauce situation, right? And people sort of freak out when you gel anything. So you want to make sure that you don't start fancy, especially if that's not actually what you want to eat. You actually want to begin thinking about techniques. And there's this wonderful book called Complete Techniques by Jacques Pepin, and that's the book that you want. Because really, you only need to buy one good knife, and you want to have knife skills, and that's going to take you so much further than knowing how to do stuff like this. The culinary manuals are also full of things like force meat and just really scary stuff from the 18th century. So anyway, so I wouldn't start there. All right. The next thing is that you want to be really clear about the fact that you can fuck up cooking anything, including baking a cake, right? All of these things that we think, oh, won't it be so beautiful and magical? It might not be. But that's part of the power when you do it correctly. So you want to throw those sort of out the window when you're thinking about cooking. Because this is just true. It doesn't matter how long you've been cooking, because every situation is different. There's a new oven, or the ingredients are maybe slightly off. There are always amazing stories that come out of it. And this is actually a salt press. I should say that I also have a cooking magazine that's made out of trees. And so a lot of these are outtakes or have been in previous issues. It's called Saucy. Okay, so I always like to say that you should dwell in the realm of the possible. There's a lot of really amazing foods and fruits that you don't have to actually do a lot to. Unless you're a chef, there's really no way to improve a dragon fruit. I wouldn't do it. I would start with stuff like that and make that the amazing dessert, or the thing that people see when they first come, or you're trying to seduce someone. And then do things that you know that you can do. So here's the thing about recipes. You need to read a recipe 5 times before you truly know it, because you need to be able to then look at it and go, okay, I can do this, and then actually be able to repeat it to somebody else without looking at the directions, because you don't actually have time to go like this when you're over the stove and something is basically on fire. right? So you want to be able to read the recipe 5 times before you go. And then also, knowledge is selected. You want to cross-reference. So what I started doing when I was teaching myself to cook is I read everything. I got a subscription to every food magazine that I could find, all the big mainstream ones. This is, back in 2000, so gourmet was still around and kind of mutating with Virgin shortly after that. And so you see these things, these like trends start to emerge, and you realize that most of the cooking magazines were pushing the same stuff year after year. Like we're going into September, so like now is like the moment where you get the butternut squash soups, right? They've been doing this for the past 20 years. It's the same thing, pomegranate seeds, if it's a fancier magazine. If it's more down home, it's going to be, it's like something with cream on top of the soup, the dollop, right? You're going to get like a fancy herb on the one, you're going to get a down home herb on the other. It's the same thing, basically the same recipe, right? So you start to look and cross-reference all these different recipes, and then you can look for the outlier. And that's probably the one that either has a really special technique, it's from a chef who's doing his own thing, it's fusion, in which case don't do it if you're learning how to cook. Or that's the outlier and that's the bad one, that's actually not the one that you want to do. Okay, the next thing is that there's lots of different diets that you can do, but there is nothing that works when you're cooking that does not have fat in it, so like just get over that right now. You can cook without salt, you can make that go, but don't try to cook without fat. I love lard, and I like to roast a duck, because duck fat is my jam, but anyway, whatever it is, just find one, pick it, it's yours. You need one. You have access to experts, and they're free, especially in New York. The Union Square Green Market is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, and people love to talk to you. So shoppers will love to help you out. When you're shopping, and the farmers will tell you with their expression when something is special. You will know, because it will probably be a little bit more expensive. But also, you'll kind of get it from them. Like there's this guy that I go to and I buy my eggs from him because he's sort of like, he looks at me, like coquettishly, like maybe I'll let you buy my eggs today. And he'll open them up and he'll be like, this is a good hen. And, I'm just like, okay, please, can I take these from you, right? So then you have to have them. So you have access to experts, and you never know what you might find. This is a raw scallop. And I found these at the Grand Army Plaza Green Market earlier this year. They're actually illegal in this country. Usually when we see scallops in this country, you only see the actual scallop, right? It's under all these other things. That thing coming across it, those are some of the hundreds of eyes. Really awesome. I know, I've heard somebody gasp in the back. It's amazing, actually. And the rose around it, which is orange, is so very beautiful. And we can talk about how, seafood is turned out for, anyway, another time. But yeah, so it's amazing. You'll learn all kinds of things the closer you get to it. We'll see if this works. Oh, good, it works. That's my gift. So these things that we get, the Williams-Sonoma catalogs, that's bullshit, you guys. Gadgets take you so far away from cooking. They make up these recipes, fucking catalogs, so that you will buy them and think, oh, I can't make butternut squash soup unless I have this special puree, whatever, right? Oh no, we're out in the middle of nowhere, I don't have it, we can't make that recipe. No, walk away. You get one gadget. I like the blowtorch. This is a consumer blowtorch, and I leveled up to a real blowtorch a couple years ago. Those are really fun. So yeah, oh, and what I'm doing here, actually, you can use a blowtorch for more than just creme brulees. You can blow the skin off of tomatoes, and then it makes them much easier to peel, right? I highly suggest you do this, especially at barbecues. You get lots of fans. So I always travel with miso paste because I find that it sort of resets my body. And this is something that I learned because you can't actually cook or be with other people when your body's not okay, when your body's angry at you. So I often travel with miso soup, and then you would be surprised. Do you remember reading stone soup when you were a kid? It's like, there's nothing, and then like people are like, oh, I have a potato, I have a carrot. Okay, and then it ends up being amazing. Miso is kind of like that. So if you travel with miso paste, or if you bring that over to a friend's house, you will be surprised at the great things that can happen. Because again, this is a building block that you can build on. So after you've learned one recipe and you've cross-referenced it, you've made it multiple times, it's becoming your own, then you can start pairing up. And we say this a lot in food nerdland. We say what grows together goes together, which means that foods taste good that come into season at the same time of year, and also things that grow near each other, right? So I don't know if you know this, I'm entranced by it. This is mace growing around the nutmeg. Isn't that cool? So these are spices, and this is how they actually grow together. I think it's amazing. So kind of the more you explore, you'll realize how you can pair foods together, and then you can start pairing food and wine and everything else, which just, gets even better. Make sure that you know who you're cooking for, and make sure that you know your own food preferences and allergies, especially if this is a really special meal, because this might not happen to you, but it might happen to you like it happens to me, where I cook the one thing that person cannot eat. One time I thought I was going to kill somebody, but I didn't. So also, this happens, New York Fashion Week that just ended today. Trends happen in food, right? And the way to do this, once you've learned how to cook and you have a couple recipes that are truly your own, is to use the trendy ingredients as accessories, right? So ladies, we know that neon pink is very big for fall right now, and then other stuff, crazy stuff is happening in spring. But we don't need to necessarily go buy a neon pink dress, right? We can use it as a scarf, we can buy a watch, whatever, right? Accessorize with the trend stuff. This is a photo from an issue last year when chefs were serving dirt all the time. Like they weren't washing their vegetables. It was like, really, are you serious? This is an outtake from an issue a couple issues back. They feed flamingo shrimp every day to keep them pink, right? So if you make your favorite things so much or too much, if you have one thing, you make it, it's awesome, then it's going to be the same, right? Like you're going to turn orange. So don't do that. You want to keep branching out and keep growing. Once you've mastered one recipe, then move on to another one. Nostalgia is incredibly powerful because not all comfort food is nostalgia, but nostalgia can be comfort food too. Nostalgia does open that time wormhole, right? So it takes us back to a place. And nostalgia doesn't just mean childhood, right? Food can do these very powerful things with nostalgia, where you go back to the thing that you ate together the first time you were with someone, right? The other thing about nostalgia that's really great is that you're able sometimes with nostalgia to help isolate what it is about the thing that makes you happy, right? So for me, it's like I love food that's crunchy. That's what it is. It's not that I'm really craving the bag of chips or whatever, it's that I'm isolating that experience, that feeling that I want to have, and that's what it is. And it would be that. This is from the issue, The Unbearable Lightness of Eating. You don't have to, go and snort salmon caviar. But when you focus on what it is on the other end of what you're cooking, that can help you sort of get really excited to cook for someone or for some event or occasion, right? Because it's how you feel on the other end. Cooking is empowering. Whenever I sort of lose my way, I try to get closer to the food. When you buy really great food from farmers that you know, people that you know, when you get closer to it, it kind of tells you what to do. This is the other reason why recipes are super dangerous, because you get hooked on the idea that whatever is down there is the truth. It's not necessarily the truth, right? You have your eyes, you're watching, you're like, you know what, this is too dry tonight, so you add in back in the pot some of the pasta water back in, or you add more oil to it, or you're like, it's just like these strawberries aren't as sweet as they usually are. I'm going to add a little bit more sugar into the jam. You keep adjusting. This is why most chef recipes always say at the end, like, to taste, right? Like, you keep tasting as you go. Just keep a spoon in and keep going. But don't think that whatever's down in the paper, if it doesn't look right to you, it might not be, okay? So trust your instincts there. Another thing that we sometimes forget when we're thinking about cooking is that actually it's about all of your senses, right? And this happens in order. So we see it, we smell it, we can taste it, we can touch it, can hear it in the pan, and this is very powerful. The more we remember that, especially as we cook for each other, the more exciting cooking can be, and the more it helps you not get bored with it. which I find happens a lot. Fresh herbs really are worth it. That doesn't mean that you need to buy them all the time or for every dish. Many people starting out learning how to cook often buy, 5 different herbs. They never use them. They kind of get like slimy and gross in those little weird plastic container things, And they're like, oh, gross, it's $15. So no, but like start with one and like really love it and know what it is. And my favorite's chervil, so you might experiment with that if you like mussels. And then once you've gone to the trouble of cooking, make sure that you do sit down at a table and respect yourself and the food that you've made and eat it. This is me drawing on eyebrows with chocolate. But you really want to, I know, but you really want to respect them and not just eat it over the sink, right? Because everything about the eating experience matters and is important, and you actually want all of it to be beautiful at the end. And it's always going to be hard, but you got this, you can do it, I'm here for you, you can tweet at me, and good luck on your food journey. Thank you.
I'm hungry now. Thank you guys so much for coming. Go learn stuff, share with other people, spread the word about the book, ask me anything you want to, and pick up your garbage.